This story is about a week old already because this specific bill that President Trump signed into law basically gave us a new branch of the United States military. So here's the background. On December 20th, 2019, President Donald Trump at Andrews Air Force Base in California signed the National Defense Authorization Act of 2020 into law. This gives a defense increase of $731 billion for funding, and of course, 12 weeks paid parental leave, raising the age of smoking, etc., etc., etc. There's a lot to go over in this bill. Some of it that I'm pretty sure that not everyone approves of. I especially heard stuff about smoking, but that is beside the point. I am not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about the major thing that is finally created: the United States Space Force. And in all honesty, pretty excited. I'm not gonna lie. I'm pretty excited for this new branch, what it can do. Now it's obvious that right now, due to our current technology as well as some other limitations, that we're not gonna simply have spacemen in space or any combat troops at all in space. I mean, it would be cool. No, don't get me wrong, but there's no way that's gonna happen until we get further along in technology. But anyways, the idea of creating a space force has been around for such a long time. You could go back to the 1960s to just see how military development in space definitely laid the foundation for something like this. Hell, even Star Wars, the Strategic Defense Initiative, not the movies, mind you, the Strategic Defense Initiative, nicknamed Star Wars by the public. This is actually created the founding steps to this United States Space Force. And of course, with other earlier advancements, aside from, of course, President Donald Trump actually appealing to the idea of creating a space force, there was also a commission made by the United States government that found that the United States Air Force was lacking in that specific field of development. It was considered a secondary objective when compared to that of cyberspace or air. So even before then, there was still some room and some support that proposed the idea of a creation of the United States Space Force. But of course, there was still some complications, especially with just how the influence of the United States Air Force is in terms of space operations, which I admit I'm kind of worried too, especially since eventually I want to join the United States Air Force. So why do we have this? Why do we have the Space Force? Well, it's very simple. Russia and China are making major advancements in space. We already seen that they made a major advantage in military technology. Hell, just in 2007, the Chinese military created an anti-satellite missile, which they managed to use on one of their obsolete satellites, and that created some space debris. There was definitely some news about this, and it was criticized by the Western world, and that definitely got people riled up about it. And that's like I said before, that space was considered secondary to the Air Force, so there was not that much development when it came to military technology within the Air Force. So of course, it was the belief that if we create a space force, there may be an opportunity to further advance that field along, since that would be the sole domain of the United States Space Force, or any sort of space branch of the United States military. Now, this has been growing in terms of interest, and I'm not just talking about here in the United States or in Russia and China, although they themselves have been growing in interest. They've even made their own space forces as a result. In the case of Russia, they created the Russian Space Forces, but it's a sub-branch now of the Russian Aerospace Forces. It's like the Air Force, and of course, the PLA has the Strategic Support Force, which focuses on space and cyberspace. But aside from that, there are also other developments. Just recently, Emmanuel Macron has issued the development of a space command within the French military. Already we are seeing a lot of nations taking a new interest in space. And already this is showing that the domain of war is further changing along. In a strange way, with when you think about the Fallout games, how it says war never changes. In a way, it doesn't change, but in a way, it does. Especially where you are fighting and how you are fighting. So that's definitely a major cornerstone. And considering that there's more foreign powers that are having a new interest in space, that's definitely going to be a future domain in terms of military usage. Now, of course, with the establishment of the United States Space Force, there have been some reactions, some positive, some negative. China sees this branch as a threat to peace and definitely opposes it, which I kind of would argue is kind of hypocritical because, well, they did, like I said before, they developed their own anti-satellite missile, which they managed to show can destroy one of their obsolete satellites and could potentially attack other foreign satellites. And of course, with cyber warfare and so much more. And of course, the establishment of their own Space Force branch within the PLA. Of course, due to the fact that the United States Space Force will remain under the Department of the Air Force, this has been a little bit of a compromise with the Air Force, which originally wanted to continue to hold on to space operations. I know that they have not that the commission earlier said that space was considered a secondary objective to the United States Air Force, but like the armament before it, which originally had control of the air forces, they definitely wanted to retain that overall aspect, probably because of either culture within the branch, or possibly just overall keeping their domain within this area to continue to have their own monopoly. It's very complex when it comes to that sort of thing. There are multiple reasons. But continue on. As a result, already we have 16,000 airmen now part of the not Air Force, Space Force, and now it's being developed into being its own military branch. For right now, there isn't going to be much recruiting going on. Because within the National Defense Authorization Act of 2020 was being crafted, a lot of people were worried about the adding of new bureaucracy within the military. So there was a belief in trying to transfer certain members of the military into this Space Force, and then eventually maybe start recruitment later, and after the entire development of this new branch, as well as its mission, its focus, what it intends to do, which for right now is not going to be. It's unclear at this point because, as earlier stated, they haven't really developed yet. They're already about a week old. This new branch is a week old. And considering that, it's going to be about 18 months before we're going to have any sort of progress before the Space Force itself is finally fleshed out and into its own thing, into its own branch, into its own separate culture within the United States military. And of course, as earlier stated, with not too much development in terms of space technology, or well, the lack of certain space technologies in order to put like troops in outer space and other necessities in order to for other uses of the military in space. There isn't going to be much for the U.S. Space Force to do, but they will definitely have a major impact on how to defend our satellites, such as GPS and a few other commercial satellites as well. So that's definitely going to be a major part of it. Of course, as time goes on, I'm pretty sure that the Space Force will develop and expand from its original use. For right now, it's going to be about satellites. It's going to be about trying to protect our satellites as well as other interests we have in space. But as time goes on, this new branch will expand further, not just within the military, not just in terms of importance, and not just in terms of development, but in reaching the stars. My name is Naomi, and on the Arc Truth. Please post your comments down below, like this video, subscribe, and share with your friends. Also, if you have any issues regarding how I create my videos, such as how I frame them, how I speak, or anything like maybe how I what subjects I decide to make about my videos, please post them down in the comment section down below, or directly message me up above. Thank you.
Almost heaven, West Virginia, Blue Ridge Mountain.